Since you're starting a new FAFSA, you're going to click on the new FAFSA link. And we are going to use, actually it's a FAFSA demonstration. So I'm going to use a fake login and username that are given to me by the Department of Ed to do this. So I'm going to click over here, but what I want, if you're a student and you're logging in with your FSA ID, I want you to click that you're the student. Otherwise, if you're the parent or if you happen to be a preparer, which is very unlikely, that would be like your tax representative, you would click here. And enter your student's first name. So our student is Helen, and her last name is last name, because the feds are very creative people. And we're gonna put in her social, and we're gonna put in her date of birth. And so this would be your student's information. If you have more than one student, you're gonna have to do more than one FAFSA, unfortunately. When you log in, you're gonna get this disclaimer that will say, you know, don't falsify information. They remind you of the regulations. Essentially, just don't intentionally try to defraud the government, and you'll be fine. So you can hit accept. And if you're coming next fall, which most of you probably are, you're looking at the 2021 academic year. So you're gonna click here. One thing I hear from parents a lot is that they are nervous about filling out the FAFSA using 2018 tax data because it's so different from what they're actually earning in 2020, 2021, or the 19 tax year. And that is okay. Go ahead and file the FAFSA using your 2018 tax data. And we have something called a professional judgment that if you think, you know, a lot has changed in your family, maybe you have a lot of medical expenses, or you have had a big change in income or a loss of income, we can work with you to make adjustments. But first, we have to have your actual FAFSA completed with the 2018 tax data. So that is your first step. So we're gonna create a save key. That's just 4 letters or numbers that you'll remember. Write that down too. If you need to go back into the specific FAFSA that you're working on to make any changes, or you hit save and come back later, you're gonna need that save key. And you can't really there's no way to retrieve it. So make sure you write that down, or it's just a number that you're very familiar with. Okay, so once we log in, we get some information here on how you can get help and all of these things. You're welcome to click through those and read them and pause the video. But I'm just gonna continue on for sake of time, because I know that this can be a long video. We're going to start off with the student information, and I think it's important to always make sure that you're looking at who is it asking information for. So at the top here, it's looking for the student. Parents is later, so make sure that we're putting in the student's name. And since I logged in, I'm going to already have this information pre-populated for me. And we're going to continue. We need an email address. So this should be an email that you and your student check frequently. I wouldn't make it a high school email because they're not going to have access to your high school email, you know, in a few months when you graduate. So go ahead and make it a phone number and an email address that you will have access to. And if you don't have one, go ahead and create a new one right now that you can use for all business purposes. And then you might want to also write down which telephone number and email address you used in your folder or wherever you're tracking this information. So once we have that, we're going to put in your permanent mailing address. So actually, let's just do, we're going to have her live on Main Street, and we're going to have her in Indianapolis, Indiana, because I know a lot of our students are coming from Indiana, and I'm going to make up a zip code. So you'll want this address to be where you would receive mail easily. A PO box or isn't going to work. So make sure that it's an actual physical address. If you have lived in Indiana for at least 5 years, go ahead and click yes. If you haven't, it's going to ask you, when did you become a resident of Indiana? That's important for state aid information. The state will actually get your FAFSA information as well. So you'll want to make sure you answer honestly and correctly in that box. Additionally, you're going to select if you're a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen, or if you are neither a citizen or eligible non-citizen. So an eligible non-citizen would be someone with very specific green cards. If you have questions on that, give our office a call. For most of us, we're going to be probably a citizen that is filing this today. It's going to ask about your high school completion status. So if you were homeschooled, you'll select that. If you have a GED, you'll select that. But if you're graduating from your high school with a high school diploma, go ahead and select that. And then it's going to ask you what degree you're working on. So most of our students are going to be working on their first bachelor's degree. But go ahead and select, like if you're working on an associate, or if you are not sure, maybe you're trying to decide between an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree, you can hit other. And then it's going to ask if you've completed a bachelor's degree before this 2021 year. No is almost always the answer. If you already have a bachelor's degree, you're not eligible for financial aid, so you wouldn't need to file the FAFSA at that point. What will your college grade level be when you begin? So if you've never attended college or coming right out of high school, you'll select that. Otherwise, go ahead and select whichever is the most accurate if you're coming in as a transfer student. We're going to select that we never have. And then you get asked about work study. For the sake of this video, I won't go into a large discussion of work study. You can find that information on our frequently asked questions page if you're interested, or you can talk to us in person. But I would go ahead and select yes. We consider everyone for work study, so it's not going to hurt anything to select yes. And that's true even if you're looking at other schools. It's fine to go ahead and select yes if you do plan to work on campus. The next question will ask if you're a male or a female. We know Helen is a female, so we're going to continue on. And then you get to put in your driver's license number. This is not required, so you don't have to enter any information here. You can, it just helps verify your identity a little bit quicker when the FAFSA is processing, but it's not a requirement. Then we get into some information that's important when figuring out sort of any special exceptions that the FAFSA might offer. If you are a foster youth or at any time in the foster care system, so if you have ever been in foster care, you would go ahead and select yes. Otherwise, no. And it's going to ask you the highest school completed by parent one. That could be mom or dad. It doesn't matter if you distinguish between parent one and parent two. But we're going to go ahead and enter some information here based on our parents. And it's going to process. And it takes a second sometimes. So it's saved your application. So if you ever decided that you needed to go ahead and save and log out and come back in, you can do that, and that information is there. And again, it reminds you that you and your always, unless noted, refers to the student. And now it wants us to enter our name of our high school. So we're going to say that the student went to Central High School in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's important here that you do enter information about your high school and don't leave that blank. If you do, our office will probably have to contact you to get that information. So go ahead and fill that out. And then it's going to tell you that based on the information, you might qualify for financial aid. So you can add up to 10 colleges that will receive your FAFSA information. So if you are looking at multiple colleges, you can add up to 10 here. If you don't know their federal school code, which is a 6-digit code every school has, you can say no and search for them. So we're going to search for Huntington and Indiana, just to show you how that search works. And it's going to say, okay, here's their federal school code, and that is ours, 001803, and Huntington. Do you want to add them? So we have to select that box and click next, or you can click add more schools. So if you wanted to add a couple other schools, you're welcome to do that, up to 9 additional schools at this time. Then it asks you your housing plans. So this isn't really set in stone. You can change this with the school, but it does help when schools are packaging you, that they know whether you're going to be on campus or off campus or living with a parent. So we're going to say on campus just for this demonstration. And then it says, what is your marital status as of today? So again, this is referring to student. So our student is, coming right out, we're going to say Helen's 18, coming right out of high school. She is not married. And then this is your dependency questions. This helps us know if you have to add parent information or not. So you're going to click through these questions. Again, for the sake of the length of this video, I'm not going to read each of them carefully. But I want you, feel free to read them very carefully and just answer honestly. One thing in the children, if you have children question, make sure you keep in mind that it does ask who received more than half of their support from you. So if you do have a child or mom and dad are helping to raise it and you're not really paying more than half of their support, you would want to answer no there. Having a child alone does not qualify you for dependency. You have to show that you're earning enough income to support them as well, or getting child support to support them. And then we're going to click through these questions because most of our students who are coming out of high school will answer no to these. And I don't want to belabor the video too long. If you have been homeless or at risk of being homeless, maybe your parents kicked you out of the house, or maybe you're not sure where your parents are, or mom or dad is in jail or hospitalized, you can answer yes here, and we will follow up with you. So just kind of click your way through that. It'll look different for you as you're working through it than it will in this demonstration, but we'll follow up with you to help you. But for, again, most of the majority of our students, the answer would be no. And then it's going to say you're considered a dependent student based on your answers. So then it's going to ask if you are able to provide parent data. Again, you can say that you're not able to, and you can still submit the FAFSA, and that will meet that state deadline of April 15th. But we will eventually need parent data, or if there's a reason you can't get it, talk to us. But parent data will be really important for determining your financial aid. So as we continue forward, it's going to ask you, what is the status of your parents? So are mom and dad married, not married, divorced? This is a section that a lot of people have a lot of anxiety over, simply because, if your parents have been divorced or were never married, it can be kind of hard to figure out what you do here. One thing to keep in mind with all of these questions is that there's this nice little question mark that opens up a new window, and it gives you information on how to really answer that question. So that's very helpful if you're not sure. And it's as of the day you filed the FAFSA. So maybe mom and dad are looking at possibly being divorced or splitting up, but they haven't yet. You would still select married. So for the sake of this, we're going to say that they were married, and we're going to have them be married in April of 1999. And now it's going to ask of your first parent. So this can be father, mother, step-parent. It doesn't matter. You can just enter one parent's information here. And we're going to enter their social security number. So you will need mom and dad's cooperation probably to help. And their first initial. So Bob is dad. We're going to have Bob last name. And we're going to have him born 1973. And B last name, Huntington. Actually, he doesn't work here. We're say at gmail.com. There we go. So, it's telling me, I'm glad that actually this didn't work, because it will give you error messages if there's a problem, which is kind of nice. So you'll just want to retype it. Make sure that those match and hit next. And then this is parent number 2. So we're going to have a new parent social security number. And maybe mom's name is Mary. So we're going to have Mary last name. And she was born August 2nd, or January 2nd of 1971. And again, I'm making these numbers up as we go along. So obviously don't do that. You'll want to enter the accurate data. And then for this question, this is important for Indiana State Aid. So make sure that you do answer yes or no accurately here if your parents have lived for the last 5 years in Indiana. This section, honestly, and we're about halfway through, so we're doing really well. It's not taking too long. This section is the most confusing for a lot of families because it's asking about household information. And again, these little question marks can help you here. But essentially, they're saying your parents are married, so we know there are 2 of them, and they're going to include you in your household. Now it's asking, do your parents have other children who, even if they don't live with your parents will provide more than half of their support. So maybe you have an older sibling who's in medical school, but mom and dad are still paying for their apartment and their cell phone and their health insurance. You would include them in your household, even if they're living like across the country. So definitely check through. If you're not sure who to include, look at these little boxes, these little question marks. And then if you still have questions, feel free to call us. We're going to say that Helen has 2 siblings. And then it's going to ask other people if they do live with your parents and your parents provide more than half of their support and will continue to do so. So let's say grandma lives with you too, or lives with Helen as well. So now we have 6 people in the household, and then not including parents, of those 6, how many are going to be in college? So we're going to say 3. So both of Helen's siblings as well as Helen are going to be in college next year. So that's the 3. And continue on to parent financial information. So this is going to ask for 2018, have your parents filed their taxes? Most likely yes, unless they have a very specific agreement with the IRS. They've already completed that, and they've done a 1040, which is what, unless you're doing a foreign tax return or Puerto Rican tax return, a 1040 is the only option now. And then what is their filing status? So these parents filed married filing joint, and it's going to say you can use the IRS data retrieval tool. Now, because we're using a demo, it won't let us link to it because there is no IRS information for Helen last name or her family that we just made up. But so you can kind of see what that would look like. The IRS data retrieval tool.com has a tutorial that kind of walks you through it. So here's where we left off on the FAFSA. It's going to ask you to enter the parent's FSA ID. That's what I told you at the beginning you would need, and password, and then hit proceed to IRS site. And then it's going to say this is for authorized use only, click OK, and then you're going to enter the exact information that they request. So essentially this is looking at 2016 tax, but it will look exactly the same for 2018. So on your 2018 federal income taxes, enter the first name and last name of the parent who logged in with their FSA ID. It already will pull in the social. We want to enter their date of birth, whether they filed married filing jointly or single, and then the address. Now, a helpful hint here is that this address has to match perfectly. So if you put, say you live on 123 West Main Street, and on your taxes, you put a W for West, or you put a period after the W, and you don't enter that here, it is going to say that the address doesn't match. So it has to look perfectly like the address on your tax return. So hopefully you have a copy of that you can look at and see what exactly you entered as your address. And if that matches, it will pull up information that looks like this. So you'll see that it's going to tell you that it's transferring all of this data to your taxes, or to the FAFSA from your taxes. And it's not going to show you what those numbers are. You won't be able to see them because it's part of protecting your privacy. Maybe your student is doing this and you don't want them to see that tax data, or maybe someone else has stolen your username and they're trying to get tax data. It's not going to show you any of this data, but you'll know that this has been transferred in. It will show that it's been transferred. So you'll click transfer now, and then it will say you successfully transferred this tax information, and it will just show transferred from IRS on any area where that transferred successfully. It's going to ask you if you filed an IRS Schedule K-1, which I believe is a rollover schedule. So definitely check your taxes to see if that's true. And then it's going to ask you a couple more questions. And then you're going to really, move forward with signing and submitting the FAFSA after that. So that is what the FSA user ID is for. As long with signing the FAFSA, it helps you get to the data retrieval tool, which just pulls everything in, so it's one less thing that you have to do. But for those who can't use it or don't want to use it, we're going to move forward with with just making up some information that we would put in. And I think this is important to look at because the FAFSA does tell you exactly what line on your tax form they're looking at. So make sure that when you have your 2018 taxes in front of you, you just look at that form and look at that line and put it in. So we're going to go ahead and put in some information here a little quickly, not reading through everything, again, for sake of time, but please read all these questions really well and then look at your 2018 1040 and look at the lines and add them up. It's kind of like the old school doing your paper taxes, what it used to be like. So just checking those lines on the forms, looking to see if you have a schedule on those taxes, and if so, entering that information. So I'm going to go through this just a little bit quickly because I don't want to make this like an hour-long video, but we do want to make sure that we kind of give you a good idea of what you're looking at here. It's asking for parent income tax. So this is the 1040 line 13 minus Schedule 2 line 46. You may not have a Schedule 2. Not everybody does. If so, if you don't have a Schedule 2, you're just going to put in line 13. So keep that in mind because we get some questions on that sometimes. And again, we're looking at parent data. And this is a lot of questions it's asking that don't really apply to the majority of the population. So again, I'm not going to go through every single one. Make sure that you're using your question marks if you have questions, and then looking at the lines, or you can always call us if you have questions. But we're going to go through saying we don't have any of those things. Child support paid. So this is child support that your parent paid. So not child support received, but if dad paid $5,000 in child support, maybe to his ex-wife, we would add that in there. And then this question is about child support received. And again, not counting foster care or adoption payments. A question we often get is about the clergy. So that question, I always encourage you to look at the question mark here. And again, if you're in the military, you don't include rent subsidies. And for housing allowances and things, you'll want to kind of review your taxes and see what that should be. And if you have questions, please give us a call. That can be kind of a complex topic to go through in this video. So if you do have questions on clergy allowance, please let us know. We're going to continue moving forward. It's going to ask about parent assets. So as of today, do the parents' assets exceed $6,100? Again, this little question mark will help because a lot of times parents say, I don't know what an asset is. What are you wanting me to include? And this will tell you. So money and cash savings and checkings, businesses, investment farms. So that's not a family farm. That would be a farm that maybe, you know, your family lives in a normal house on a city block, but they own a farm and employ quite a few people to work that farm for them. That's what they're talking about here. And then any other investments that are not in a retirement plan. Do not include retirement plan assets, the value of your life insurance, the home in which your parents live. You don't include their car. So just these things. And if you do have questions, please let us know. So we're going to say no. If you say yes, you'll get asked a couple more questions that you can answer. And that's really it for the parent's financial data. And it's even faster if you use the IRS data retrieval tool. So keep that in mind. And then the student is going to basically walk through the same thing. Has the student filed a tax return? So we're going to say that Helen has not worked and filed a return while she's in high school. So obviously with no tax return, she wouldn't be able to use the data retrieval tool anyway. But we're going to put in, maybe she had a babysitting job and she earned $1,200. So we want to make sure we put that in. And then again, we're going to get those same number of questions. For nearly all of our students, these will be 0 if you are coming right out of high school. But do read them. If you did file taxes, do make sure that you look through these things to see if they do apply to you. And then it's going to ask, as of today, what is the total current balance of cash? So Helen has $500, let's say, in her bank account. She does not own a home, and she doesn't have any business and investment farm net worth. So it's going to make us enter zeros here. That's why those little red boxes pop up. Okay, so now we're ready to submit. So we made it through the FAFSA in about a half an hour. If you have your 2018 taxes in front of you and your FSA IDs, it really doesn't take much longer than that, especially if you've done it once or twice before. So we're going to make sure that we say we're not a preparer unless you happen to be a tax preparer doing this for a family, but most of the time that's no. If grandma helps you, that doesn't make her a preparer. She would still say no. So we're going to then get a summary of everything that we entered. Just walk through and make sure that this looks right. There's nothing here that looks weird. You didn't accidentally enter, maybe instead of $1,200, you put in $12,000. Just be careful about that. And then you get to go to the signature page. And again, because Helen and her parents don't exist, I can't actually sign this and submit it, but you would do provide student signature, and the student would read this. So Helen would be reading this. She would hit next, and then she would enter her username, her FSA ID username and password here. And that will really help her hit sign this FAFSA. It will go through, and then it will take her back to this page. Parent will do provide parent signature. The parent selects which parent they are. So let's say that this parent is the one that's working with her to sign this. He would do the same thing, hit agree, username and password, hit sign this FAFSA after he enters those. And then you'll get a confirmation page that will say, congratulations, you've completed the FAFSA.